Before we get started talking about all the aspects of different squares, let's go through and talk about the parts. The main part, the part that you're going to hold on to, is the head of the square. This is also called the stock in some cases. It will typically have, at the very least, a 90-degree face that you can reference against the blade. The traditional combination squares will also have a 45-degree face, and then this face here is 90 degrees to the wide part of the stock and 45 to the angled part of the stock. So that can come in handy sometimes as well. You also may have noticed that some of these stocks have level bubbles in them. And there's also, with the Starretts and a few of the others, there's a scribe in here that's typically used for metalwork. I mean, these are all metalworking tools that we've repurposed for woodworking. The scribe is the first thing that tends to disappear from my squares. They get lost in the bottom of toolboxes or left on benches, and then they roll into a corner somewhere. So they get lost, they get found. They don't ever really get used in my shop. The next part inside the square in a combination square is the locking bolt. This is what allows you to move the blade in and out. You just loosen it and tighten it. There is a shaft that goes up and a tongue that rides inside this groove. So you can pull this out and you can spin it around. You can rotate, let's see if you can see that. You can rotate the part around and put the groove on the other side. So depending upon which graduation you need to use for your work, you can get that either against the fence or out on the outside edge, depending upon what's useful for you. So don't be afraid to take the ruler out and flip it around however you need. And then that brings us to the rule. So this rule is a straight edge. It's a marking rule, and it's going to be steel, and it's going to be forged. It's going to be hardened steel. Okay, now that we know the basic parts, let's talk about your options. When you're talking about a combination square like a Starrett, you'll need to choose between a cast head and a forged head. The cast head is just that. It's been cast and then it's been precision ground square. Those are great heads, and I think for most people who aren't going to use their combination squares really heavily, that's probably okay. The advantage to going with the forged head, which is a little more expensive, is that it's harder, it resists shock a little bit better, and my shop is concrete and I drop tools, so I went ahead and got the forged head. With the Sterling square, they only do cast, and it's a little bit smaller square, so you can carry it around. Just be careful, try not to drop it on a concrete floor. This thing usually rides in my apron, so it's less likely to be dropped anyways or knocked off of a bench because it just goes right back in my tool apron. The next option you're going to have is the blade. So if you are a metric woodworker, you're going to want to get a metric blade. The one thing that all the blades should have in common, as far as I'm concerned, is that they should have the satin matte finish. So I guess they call that satin chrome at Sterling. But you don't want a shiny ruler. The shiny rulers are really hard to read. The glare makes it really challenging. I was told this when I was getting started, and I never really had a chance to really see what it was like until somebody brought one with a shiny chrome ruler, and it was just really hard to use that tool. The marking, if you're not a metric woodworker, if you're an imperial woodworker, I suggest you go with the 4R graduation. What that means is that you have 4 different scales. One side has 1/8 of an inch and 1/16 of an inch, and the other side has 32nds and 64ths. I don't know that you'll really use the 64ths or the 32nds that much, but occasionally you might find them useful. It's the 1/8s and the 1/16ths that are really helpful for most hand tool woodworking. On the Sterling square, you have your choice of 4R. You've got metric, you've got half metric, half imperial. He's got a lot of options to choose from over at Sterling Toolworks.